This is technically still the first week of the unfolding Ontario election, although we have rolled into the second calendar week of it, I guess, so we'll go with that. One of the things that's still strange, I find, about this election is how we are largely ignoring the pandemic, although something finally interesting has happened on that front. On Saturday, the Ontario Liberals had said that they would add pediatric COVID-19 vaccines for those kids who are in the eligible age range, which I think currently is 5 to 12. I think that's the upper band. They would make those vaccines mandatory to attend school. There's nothing controversial about mandatory vaccination for school kids. I have young kids myself, and when you're sending them off to school, you get asked, are they fully vaccinated? What would change here would be adding to the list of mandatory vaccines the COVID-19 vaccines. So all the existing vaccines your kids get, typically when they're very, very, very young, COVID-19 vaccine would be added to the mandatory list. This is one of the first things we've seen either of the opposition parties do that actually differentiate themselves on a specific pandemic management file from the Ontario Progressive Conservatives. Up until now, the NDP and the Liberals haven't had much to say about this. My gut feeling had been that they didn't really want to pick any fights on this one because they didn't see any wins there. As much as this blows away critics of the Ford government, I actually think where the Ford government has gone, first of all, it's generally in line with where the other provinces are. I also think it's generally in line with where the Ontario public is. Not necessarily where some of the more strident critics and the loudest critics of the Ford government are, but where the majority of the people are. For better or worse, the public has largely moved on. And just yelling at Doug Ford for letting it happen doesn't necessarily win you any votes if you are a Liberal or an NDP candidate and you're actually trying to get elected in the upcoming election. My assumption had been that's why the parties weren't talking about it very much. They were saying, yeah, you know what, maybe we disagree, but we're not going to win any votes by saying this. School vaccinations, pediatric vaccinations, making them mandatory is the first real step in that direction we've seen from either of the parties thus far. I think it's a strange one. I don't think there's going to be broad public support for this. I don't think it will, I don't know if it'll help very much, given that in general terms, children are less affected by COVID-19. And by help, I mean, will it actually meaningfully improve our healthcare system? Look, the vaccines will probably, if they became 100% adopted among children, I'm sure it would prevent some serious illnesses, maybe even some very bad outcomes among children. But at a scale sufficient to alter the course of the pandemic, no, probably not. Now, hey, a kid that never gets sick is a win. A kid that never dies is obviously a win. But in terms of an overall net public health benefit, it would likely be fairly modest, maybe even marginal. The fact of the matter is as well that vaccination rates among children are low because parents have chosen not to get their children vaccinated. And when you look at the adult vaccination rates in Canada and in Ontario, they're very, very high. Parents, in general, chose to become vaccinated and then, in many cases, chose not to vaccinate their children. You can assume that they all just got lazy or they've been busy or they flaked out. Or you can assume that they looked at it, decided, I'm not going to do it. For what it's worth, my kids are vaccinated. Both of them are, so this is not going to have any tangible effect on me or my family. Kids will continue going to school no matter what happens. But from a political perspective, purely a political perspective, I ask this question. Is there anyone who will embrace this policy who is not likely already either voting for the Ontario Liberals or at least voting against Doug Ford? I don't know. Maybe a few. We're probably at the margins here. We can debate this as a public health measure, and it would be a debate, by the way, because I'm not sure that denying kids access to schooling, in-person schooling at least, would be a real winner in terms of equity of outcomes and a free society and a well-educated society. So we could have that debate, but just to make it purely about the politics, I'm skeptical. But hey, who knows what advice the Liberals are getting. Folks, that's it for me. Thanks for watching as always. Take care.